The shuttle dropped through the atmosphere of the planet like a stone falling through golden water. The sky outside the windows was not blue. It was a soft, shifting amber, streaked with bands of pale violet, and the light that came through it was warm and gentle, like late afternoon sunlight on Earth in the middle of autumn. Nathan sat in the back of the shuttle, with his hands gripping his knees. Beside him sat Claire Dawson, who was checking her translation equipment for the 10th time. Across from them, Sergeant Adam Perry sat with his rifle across his lap, and his eyes hard and watchful. Next to Perry were Dr. Hannah Marsh, the ship's biologist, and Kyle Whitfield, the engineer. 5 humans, dropping into an alien world. Nobody spoke. Captain Griffin's voice crackled through the radio from the starward horizon in orbit above. "Landing party, you are clear for touchdown. Be careful down there." When the doors opened, the air that rushed in was warm and smelled like nothing Nathan had ever encountered before. Something between fresh rain, honey, and the clean smell of stones after a storm. He stepped out onto the ground and felt it give slightly under his boots, soft and warm. And for a moment, he could have sworn the ground pulsed, like the slow, steady beat of a sleeping heart. The valley was surrounded by trees, but they were not trees as Nathan understood them. They were enormous pillars of crystal, pale blue and green, rising 100 feet into the air, and they hummed, a low, deep sound that Nathan felt in his teeth and his bones and the back of his skull. It was not unpleasant. It was like standing inside a cathedral made of tuning forks. Hannah Marsh dropped to her knees and pressed her hand against the ground. "It is alive," she whispered. "The soil, the trees, everything. This whole planet is one connected living system." Kyle Whitfield was scanning the crystal trees with his equipment, and his face was pale. "The energy readings are off the charts. These things are not just alive, they are generating power. This entire valley is a living power grid." Perry said nothing. He just checked his rifle and watched the tree line. They came within minutes. They emerged from between the crystal trees, moving with a slow, graceful ease that made them look like they were walking through water. There were 12 of them, tall and slender, their skin ranging from deep violet to pale lavender. Their eyes glowed softly, amber, gold, pale green. They wore clothes that seemed to be made of light itself, shifting colors with every step, and they carried nothing, no weapons, no tools, nothing but themselves. Nathan's heart stopped. At the center of the group, walking half a step ahead of the others, she was exactly as she had appeared in his dreams. The violet skin, smooth and faintly luminous, the silver-white hair floating around her shoulders, the amber eyes, large and deep and full of something that Nathan could only describe as knowing. She looked at him, and the warmth in his chest exploded into something so powerful that it nearly knocked him off his feet. She smiled. That same smile, the slight parting of her lips, the pulse of light under her cheeks, the brightening of her eyes, and Nathan understood, in that moment, with absolute and terrifying certainty, that she had been the one who sent the signal. She had reached across 42 light-years of empty space, through the cold and the dark and the silence, and she had found him. Claire stepped forward with her translation device, her voice steady, despite the fact that her hands were trembling. The alien woman spoke, and her voice was like music. Not human music, but something older and stranger. A sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the trees and the ground and the air itself. Claire worked quickly. The language was unlike anything she had ever studied, but the secondary emotional layer in the signal had given her a foundation to build on. Within an hour, they had enough to begin a basic conversation. The woman's name was Alindra. She was what her people, the Vayrith, called a heart reader, a being born with the ability to feel the emotions of others, across vast distances. She explained, slowly and patiently, that she had felt Nathan's mind months ago, a bright point of warmth and wonder flickering in the darkness between the stars. She had shaped the signal to reach him specifically, tuned to a frequency that his heart would recognize, even if his mind did not. "I did not go looking for you," she told him, and Claire translated the words in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "You were simply too bright to miss." Nathan stood before her, and he could not speak. He was a practical man. He fixed broken radios and drank bad coffee and filed reports. He was not the kind of man who believed in destiny or fate or love at first sight. But his body did not care what he believed. His hands were shaking. His eyes were burning. And the warmth in his chest was so strong that he thought it might actually kill him. "I saw you," he said. His voice cracked. "In my dreams, every night, I saw you." Iolindra tilted her head. The glow under her skin brightened, and her amber eyes shimmered. "I know," she said simply. "I was there." Perry stepped forward, his hand on his rifle. "Lieutenant Cole, step back. We do not know what we are dealing with here." Nathan did not step back. He did not even look at Perry. He looked at Iolindra, and she looked at him, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with words or language, or the 42 light-years that had separated them until this moment. The Vayrith led them to a great hall grown from living crystal, where the walls pulsed with soft light, and the ceiling opened to the amber sky. They sat together, 5 humans and 12 Vayrith, and they shared a meal. The food was strange, but good, sweet and warm and filling. And as they ate, the Vayrith watched the humans with an expression that Nathan slowly realized was not curiosity. It was hope. These ancient, beautiful, impossibly advanced beings were looking at the 5 confused, frightened, overwhelmed humans sitting at their table, and what they felt was hope. They could barely speak to each other. The language barrier was still enormous, and Claire could only translate so fast. But it did not matter, because when Iolindra placed her hand on the table near his, and Nathan placed his hand next to hers, and their fingers barely touched, he felt something flow between them, a warmth, a recognition, a feeling that said without any words at all, "There you are. I have been waiting for you." And for the first time in his life, Nathan Cole, nobody special, felt like he was exactly the person he was supposed to be. 3 weeks passed on Ilara 7, and in those 3 weeks, everything changed. Claire Dawson worked day and night on the Vayrith language, and she made progress that would have taken years under normal circumstances. The Vayrith helped her. They were patient teachers, gentle and encouraging, and they seemed genuinely delighted by the speed at which this small, stubborn human woman was learning to speak their tongue. By the end of the 2nd week, Claire could hold a basic conversation. By the end of the 3rd, she was translating in near real time. Captain Griffin opened formal diplomatic channels with the Vayrith High Council, a group of 12 elders who governed not through power, but through consensus and wisdom. She sent detailed reports back to Earth through the ship's quantum link relay, and the response from United Earth Command was careful but excited. Humanity had made first contact with an intelligent alien civilization, and so far, nobody had died. That alone was considered a miracle. But not everyone was happy. Sergeant Adam Perry had been watching the Vayrith with growing unease since the first day. He was not a bad man. He did not hate the Vayrith or wish them harm. But he was a soldier, and soldiers are trained to see danger where others see beauty. He looked at the crystal trees and saw power generators that could be weaponized. He looked at the Vayrith's light-woven clothing and saw technology that could make a man invisible on a battlefield. He looked at Iolindra and saw a being who could reach inside a human mind and pull it apart like wet paper. He went to Captain Griffin with his concerns. She is inside his head, Captain, he said, meaning Alindra and Nathan. She found him across 42 light-years. She shaped a signal specifically to attract him. That is not love. That is targeting. Griffin listened. She was a fair woman, and she took Perry's concerns seriously. But she had also spent 3 weeks watching Nathan and Alindra together. And what she saw did not look like manipulation. It looked like two people discovering something they did not know they had been missing. Keep watching, she told Perry, but do not interfere. Not yet. Nathan, meanwhile, was falling deeper into a world he did not fully understand. Alindra took him walking through the bioluminescent fields that stretched beyond the Crystal Valley. She showed him flowers that opened when they felt his heartbeat, and closed when he moved away. She showed him rivers that sang, actually sang, in harmonies that shifted with the time of day. She showed him a sky full of stars that looked nothing like the sky above Earth. And she pointed out the faint, barely visible dot that was his sun. And she told him that she had spent many nights looking at that dot and wondering about the beings who lived around it. She began teaching him to feel the way her people felt. It was not easy. The Vayrith did not experience emotions the way humans did. For humans, emotions were internal, private, often hidden. For the Vayrith, emotions were as visible and tangible as light. They flowed between people like currents in a river. A Vayrith could feel the joy of someone standing 10 feet away, as clearly as they could feel the sun on their own skin. Alindra placed her hand on Nathan's chest, over his heart, and she asked him to close his eyes and feel. Not think, not analyze, just feel. At first, he felt nothing. Then slowly, like the first light of dawn creeping over a dark horizon, he began to sense something. A warmth that was not his own. A steady, deep, ancient pulse of emotion that came from the ground beneath his feet, from the trees around him, from the air he was breathing, and most of all, from the woman standing in front of him with her hand on his heart. It was love. But not the kind of love he had known before. Not the desperate, clutching, fearful love of human relationships. The love that was always tangled up with jealousy and insecurity and the terror of being abandoned. This was something else. Something vast and calm and certain. It was the love of a being who had lived for centuries, who had watched stars be born and die, and who had looked across the infinite darkness of space and found, in one unremarkable human man, something worth reaching for. Nathan opened his eyes, and there were tears on his face. "I feel you," he whispered. Alindra smiled. "You just did not know it." But the deeper Nathan fell into this new world, the more he felt the pull of the old one. He was changing, and he knew it. He was becoming more perceptive, more sensitive, more aware of the emotions of the people around him. He could feel Perry's distrust like a cold wind. He could feel Claire's excitement like a fire. He could feel the quiet, steady loyalty of Kyle Whitfield and the wide-eyed wonder of Hannah Marsh. And he could feel his own fear growing alongside his love like a shadow growing alongside a flame. What was he becoming? Was he still human? If he gave himself completely to this bond with Alindra, would he lose the things that made him who he was? Would he forget the taste of his mother's cooking, the sound of rain on a tin roof, the feeling of a cold beer on a hot day? Would he become something other, something between human and Vayrith, belonging fully to neither world? One evening, he and Alindra sat together beneath the alien sky, and she felt his fear as clearly as if he had spoken it aloud. She told him a story. Millions of years ago, the first heart reader had fallen in love with a being from another world. That being's species could not love the way the Vayrith loved. The heart reader had poured all of herself into the bond, and received nothing in return, and the emptiness had nearly killed her. "But you are different," Alindra said, and her voice was gentle but firm. Your people are young. You are loud and messy, and sometimes you hurt each other in ways that make no sense. But you feel with a power that takes my breath away. You burn so brightly, Nathan. I felt you across the space between our stars. Not because I was searching, because you were impossible to miss. He wanted to believe that being human was enough. But before he could answer, Claire's voice crackled over his communicator, sharp and urgent. Nathan, get back to base, now. A second ship just entered the system. He looked at Alindra, and he saw something in her amber eyes that he had never seen before. Fear. The heavy cruiser Ironclad dropped out of faster-than-light travel like a fist punching through a wall. It was 4 times the size of the starward horizon, bristling with weapons, and it carried 300 Marines under the command of Vice Admiral Gregory Hale, a man who had never met a problem he could not solve with superior firepower. Hale's orders came from a faction within United Earth Command that did not share Captain Griffin's optimism about the Vayrith. They saw an alien civilization with technology beyond human comprehension, and they saw a threat. Hale was here to assess, secure, and if necessary, contain. Nathan stood on the balcony of the Crystal Hall and watched the Ironclad's running lights blink against the amber sky, and the warmth in his chest turned cold. The piece they had built was 3 weeks old. It was fragile and new and beautiful, like a flower that had just begun to open. And something heavy was coming to crush it. Vice Admiral Gregory Hale was not a cruel man. Nathan needed to remember that. Even as Hale's Marines poured out of their shuttles and set up defensive positions around the human base like they were expecting an invasion. Hale was 61 years old. He had fought in 3 colonial wars. He had buried friends on moons that did not have names, in places so far from Earth that the light of the sun was just another dot in the sky. He had spent his entire life keeping humanity alive in a universe that did not care whether humanity lived or died, and he had learned one lesson above all others. Trust is a luxury that gets people killed. He arrived at the base with 4 armed guards and a face made of stone. Captain Griffin met him at the landing pad. "Vice Admiral," she said, "welcome to Alara 7. "Save it," Hale said. "I have read your reports. You have been here 3 weeks, and in that time you have opened your ship, your data, and your people to an alien species with technology that could wipe us out between breakfast and lunch. One of your officers is emotionally compromised by an alien female who can read minds. And you are standing here telling me welcome?" Griffin's jaw tightened, but she held her ground. "Sir, the Vayrith are not hostile. They have shown us nothing but openness and generosity." "That is what worries me," Hale said. Within hours, Hale had taken operational control of the base. He ordered all Vayrith technology research handed over to his staff. He restricted the landing party to the base perimeter, and he ordered Nathan Cole removed from all contact duties, effective immediately. "You are compromised, Lieutenant," Hale told Nathan, standing in the small room that served as Nathan's quarters. "I do not blame you. These beings have abilities we do not understand. But until we know exactly what that alien woman has done to your head, you are off the board." Nathan felt the anger rise in him like a wave. He opened his mouth to argue, to shout, to tell this old soldier that he had no idea what he was talking about. But before a single word came out, he felt something, a gentle, steady warmth pressing against his chest from the inside, like a hand placed softly over his heart. Alindra. She was not here. She was half a mile away, in the Crystal Hall, surrounded by her own people. But she could feel his anger, and she was reaching out to him, not to control him or calm him, but to remind him that she was there. Nathan took a breath, then another. "Understood, sir," he said quietly. Hale stared at him for a long moment, then turned and left. The next 2 days were the worst Nathan had experienced since arriving on Alara 7. The Marines patrolled the perimeter in full combat gear, weapons loaded. The Verith watched them from the crystal tree line with expressions of deep, quiet sadness. They did not retreat. They did not threaten. They simply watched, the way a parent watches a child throw a tantrum, with sorrow and patience and an unshakable belief that the child will eventually calm down. Perry, to his credit, was uncomfortable with the situation. He had been suspicious of the Verith from the start, but Hale's approach felt wrong to him. Too aggressive, too hostile, too much like preparation for a war that nobody wanted. "This is not what I asked for," Perry told Claire one evening. "I wanted caution. Hale wants conquest." Claire looked at him. "Then help us fix it." Nathan went to Captain Griffin with a plan. It was simple, it was risky, and it would almost certainly end Griffin's career. "We ask for a formal meeting," Nathan said. "Hale, the Verith High Council, everyone in the same room. Let them see each other. Let them talk." Griffin shook her head slowly. "He will never agree to it." "He will if you frame it as an intelligence-gathering opportunity. Tell him it is a chance to assess the Verith leadership up close. That is a language he understands." Griffin looked at Nathan for a long time. Then she smiled, just slightly, and Nathan realized that behind the captain's careful, professional exterior, there was a woman who had come to love this strange, beautiful world just as much as he had. "All right," she said. "Let us do it." The meeting took place in the Great Crystal Hall on the third day after Hale's arrival. The Verith High Council sat on one side of a long table grown from living crystal, 12 ancient beings whose amber eyes held the weight of millions of years of history. On the other side sat Hale, Griffin, Perry, Claire, and Nathan. Hale sat with his back straight and his hands flat on the table. He did not make small talk. He spoke in short, clipped sentences, and Claire translated them faithfully. He wanted assurances. He wanted treaties. He wanted inspections of Verith technology. He wanted guarantees that the Verith's heart readers would never enter a human mind without explicit consent. He wanted, in short, control. The Verith elders listened. They did not interrupt. They did not argue. When Hale finished, they looked at each other in silence, and Nathan could feel the currents of emotion flowing between them, sadness, patience, and something that felt like a very old, very tired kind of understanding. Then Alindra stood up. She had not been part of the formal council. She had been sitting behind the elders, quiet and still. But now she stepped forward, and every eye in the room turned to her. And then she did something that no heart reader had done to a human being before. She opened her mind to him. Not aggressively, not like an attack. She simply lowered every wall, every barrier, every defense she had, and she let Gregory Hale feel what she felt. Hale's face went white. Nathan watched, and he could sense through his bond with Alindra the edges of what she was sharing. The vast, ancient love that the Verith carried for all living things. The memory of wars they had fought millions of years ago, terrible wars that had nearly destroyed them, and the long, painful decision to choose a different path. The sorrow of watching younger civilizations tear themselves apart. The hope, fierce and stubborn and unbreakable, that this time would be different. And beneath all of that, woven through it like a thread of gold through dark cloth, the specific, personal, undeniable love she felt for Nathan Cole. A love that was not strategy, not manipulation, not a weapon, just a woman who had looked across the darkness and found someone worth reaching for. Hale sat perfectly still for 7 seconds. His face did not move. His hands did not move. But Nathan saw something change behind his eyes. A crack in the stone, a sliver of light breaking through. Hale stood up abruptly. "This meeting is in recess," he said, and his voice was not quite steady. He turned and walked out of the hall. He did not come back for 2 hours. When he returned, his face was still made of stone. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He sat down at the table and looked at the Vayrith elders, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet. "I am pulling the Marines back to the ship," he said. "We will open diplomatic channels, proper ones. No inspections, no seizures." He paused. "But I want a direct line of communication between the Ironclad and the Vayrith Council, open at all times. No surprises." The eldest of the Vayrith, a being whose skin was so pale it was nearly white, and whose eyes glowed like twin moons, inclined their head. "That is reasonable," they said, through Claire. And just like that, the crisis was over. That evening, Nathan and Aelindra stood together on a balcony of the Crystal Hall, watching the lights of the Ironclad's shuttles rising back into orbit. The amber sky was darkening into deep violet, and the first stars were appearing, sharp and bright and impossibly numerous. "I was afraid," Nathan said quietly. "I was afraid he would ruin everything." Aelindra stood close beside him. Her hand found his, and her fingers, long and warm and faintly glowing, laced through his. "He was afraid too," she said. "That is all it ever is, Nathan. Fear. And the question is always the same. Do you let the fear close your hand into a fist, or do you let it open into something else?" "What did you show him?" Alindra's amber eyes shimmered. "The truth. That is all. I showed him what I feel when I look at you, and I let him decide what to do with it." Nathan shook his head slowly. "That was a hell of a gamble." "No," Alindra said, "it was not. Because I have felt the hearts of your people, Nathan. They are afraid and angry and confused. But underneath all of that, they want so badly to be good. They want so badly to be brave. All they need is someone to show them that it is safe to open their hands." Nathan looked out at the darkening sky, at the stars his species was only just beginning to reach, and he held Alindra's hand tighter. "I do not know what comes next," he said. She smiled. That smile, the one that had crossed 42 light-years to find him. "You do," she said. "You have always known. That is why I found you." 1 year later, Nathan Cole stood in a dwelling that had been grown for him from living crystal and warm, breathing wood, and he looked out at a world that still took his breath away every single morning. He was no longer a lieutenant. He was no longer a communications officer. He was, by official decree of United Earth Command, humanity's first permanent ambassador to Alara 7 and the Vayrith civilization. It was a title that had not existed 6 months ago. They had created it for him because there was simply nobody else who could do what he did. The dwelling the Vayrith had grown for him was a strange and beautiful thing. It was shaped like a human house, rooms, a kitchen, a bed, but the walls were made of pale blue crystal that hummed softly in the mornings and glowed faintly at night. The floor was warm beneath his bare feet, and the air always smelled clean, like rain and stone, and something sweet that he had never been able to name. Aelindra was standing in the doorway, watching him with those amber eyes that still, after a year, made his heart do something stupid every time he looked at them. Their bond had deepened beyond anything he could have imagined. The Vayrith called it soul thread, a connection between two beings so deep that they could feel each other across the entire planet. Not thoughts, not words, just feelings. The quiet hum of each other's days, the rise and fall of mood and energy and emotion, like two instruments playing in the same key. Nathan could feel Aelindra's contentment right now, warm and golden, like sunlight pooling in his chest. And he knew she could feel his. The mixture of peace and homesickness and love and worry that had become the background noise of his life. Because the truth was, it was not all easy. Nathan missed Earth. He missed it the way you miss a person who is still alive but very far away. He missed the sound of traffic, and the smell of gasoline, and the way the sky looked during a thunderstorm. He missed baseball. He missed pizza. He missed his mother's voice on the phone and his brother's bad jokes, and the feeling of walking down a street in a city full of humans who did not know his name and did not care. He had changed, and the change was not always comfortable. The soul thread with Ailindra had opened doors in his mind that he did not know existed. He felt things more deeply now. He noticed things he had never noticed before, the hidden sadness in a smile, the quiet fear behind a brave face, the way loneliness sounded when it thought nobody was listening. And he carried Ailindra's feelings too. Her ancient grief, the sorrow of a species that had watched the rise and fall of civilizations for millions of years. Her joy, which was vast and quiet and patient. Her love, which was so complete and total that it sometimes felt like standing in the middle of an ocean with no shore in sight. It was wonderful, and it was exhausting, and some nights, lying in his crystal bed on an alien world, Nathan Cole wondered if he had given up too much of himself. Claire Dawson was still on Ilara 7. She had become the leading expert on the Vayrith language and culture, and she was writing a book that she said would either win her every academic prize on Earth, or get her locked up in a psychiatric hospital. She and Nathan had dinner together every week, and she had become the closest thing he had to a best friend. One evening, after too much Vayrith wine, which tasted like liquid starlight and hit like a freight train, Nathan told her about his doubts. Claire looked at him across the table with the expression of a woman who was about to say something true and not particularly gentle. "You are being an idiot," she said. "Thank you, Claire. I mean it. You are sitting here on the most beautiful planet anyone has ever seen, bonded to a woman who loves you more than any human being has ever been loved in the history of our species, serving as the bridge between two civilizations, and you are moping because you miss pizza. It is really good pizza." "Nathan," Claire leaned forward, "do you know why we came out here? Do you know why humanity reached for the stars? It was not so we could stay the same. It was so we could grow. It hurts. That is what growing feels like." Nathan looked at her for a long time. Then he laughed, and the laugh felt good, and he realized that he had not laughed like that in weeks. "When did you get so wise?" he asked. "I have been studying an alien civilization that has had millions of years to figure this stuff out. Some of it was bound to rub off." 6 months after that conversation, the galaxy came knocking. A ship appeared at the edge of the system. Not human, not Vayrith. It was black and angular and sharp, like a blade hanging in space, and it did not respond to any communication attempts for 3 full days. When it finally spoke, the message was translated by Claire in a voice that was very carefully controlled. The ship belonged to the Tortian Dominion, a militaristic empire that controlled over 200 star systems and governed through strength and fear. The Tortian had heard about the Human-Vayrith alliance, and they had come to have a look. The Tortian ambassador was a tall, gray-skinned being with 4 arms and eyes like polished black stones. He came down to Ilara 7 with a guard of 6 soldiers in heavy armor, and he walked through the crystal hall like he owned it. He met with the Vayrith High Council and Nathan, who stood as humanity's representative. The ambassador was polite in the way that powerful people are polite when they do not consider you a threat. Carefully, condescendingly, with a smile that never reached his eyes. He made his position clear. The Tortian Dominion was the dominant power in this region of the galaxy. Civilizations either joined the Dominion's sphere of influence and enjoyed its protection, or they were left to face the dangers of the galaxy alone. And there were many dangers. Pirates, rogue species, things in the dark between stars that did not have names and did not negotiate. The implication was obvious. Join or suffer. The Vayrith elders listened with their ancient patience, They had heard this speech before, from other empires, over millions of years. They were not impressed. But it was Nathan who answered. He stood up from his seat at the crystal table, and he looked at the Tortian ambassador, and he felt Elindra's warmth at his side, like a fire that could not be put out. He spoke simply. He spoke in plain words, the way a man speaks when he has nothing to prove and nothing to hide. He told the ambassador about Earth, about the wars and the plagues and the famines, about the centuries of cruelty, the long dark years when humanity had done terrible things to itself and to the world that had given it life. He did not hide any of it. He did not make excuses. And then he told them about the other side, about the way humans rebuilt after every disaster, about the way a mother will walk through fire for her child, about the way strangers will pull each other out of rubble after an earthquake, about the stubborn, irrational, completely unreasonable belief that tomorrow can be better than today, even when every piece of evidence says otherwise. He told them about falling in love with a woman from another world, about how it did not make him less human, about how it made him see more clearly, feel more deeply, and fight harder for the things that mattered. And then he said the thing that mattered most. Humanity is young, he said. We are small. We are fragile. We break easily, and we make more mistakes than anyone should be allowed to make. But we do not kneel. Not to fear, not to power, not to anyone who tells us that the universe is too dark and too dangerous for us to walk through it with our eyes open and our hands reaching out. You can hurt us, but you cannot make us stop hoping, and you cannot make us stop loving, and in my experience, that tends to be enough. The hall was silent. The Tortian ambassador stared at Nathan for a long, long time. His black eyes were unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and left. His guards followed. Their ship departed the system within the hour. 3 days later, Virith intelligence intercepted a Tortian communication. The ambassador's report to the Dominion High Command was brief. His recommendation regarding humanity was simple. Do not provoke them. They are irrational, emotionally unstable, and bonded to the heart readers. They cannot be predicted, and they cannot be controlled. Leave them alone. Nathan read the report and laughed until he cried. That evening, he and Elindra walked together through the bioluminescent fields where she had first appeared in his dreams, a lifetime ago. The flowers glowed around them, soft blues and purples and golds, and the sky above was thick with stars. Elindra stopped and turned to face him. She placed her hand over his heart, and he felt the warmth of her touch spread through his entire body, into his bones, into his blood, into the quiet place at the center of his being, where he kept the things that mattered most. When I first felt you, she said, you were a single bright point in an ocean of silence. Do you know what you are now? Nathan shook his head. You are a bonfire, she said, and your whole species burns the same way, bright and reckless, and so full of love that it frightens the darkness. Nathan looked at the woman he loved, the alien woman with violet skin and silver hair and amber eyes, the woman who had reached across the stars to find him, and he smiled. Not because he was brave, not because he was special, but because he was human. And being human meant standing in the middle of the infinite, terrifying, beautiful universe, and choosing every single day to keep your heart open. Elindra smiled back. That smile, the one that had started everything. And somewhere out in the vast and ancient galaxy, the darkness took notice, and was for the first time in a very long while, afraid. Not of weapons, not of ships, not of empires, but of a species that simply refused to stop loving, no matter how much the universe told them it was foolish. And that, in the end, was the most human thing of all. Nathan Cole was nobody special. He knew that. He was a communications officer on a deep space ship called the Starward Horizon, and his job was simple. He listened to the noise of the universe, filtered out the garbage, and filed reports that nobody ever read. He had been doing this for 3 years, and in all that time, the universe had never once said anything interesting. Until tonight. He was sitting at his station, half asleep, a cold cup of coffee next to his elbow, when his screen lit up with a pattern he had never seen before. It was not random. It was not natural. It was a clean, repeating signal, structured like a language, pulsing like a heartbeat, and it was coming from a star system 42 light-years away. Nathan sat up straight. He ran the signal through every filter he had. He checked for errors. He checked again. His hands were shaking. He called Captain Laura Griffin. Griffin was a tall woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and the kind of face that did not show surprise easily. But when she looked at Nathan's screen, her eyes went wide. "How long has this been coming in?" she asked. "I picked it up 6 minutes ago," Nathan said. "It is structured, Captain. It is not noise. Someone made this." Griffin stared at the screen for a long time. Then she picked up the ship's intercom and called the senior staff to the bridge. Within an hour, the entire crew of 62 knew what was happening. Dr. Claire Dawson, the ship's language expert, began working on the signal immediately. She sat next to Nathan for 14 hours straight, breaking the signal apart piece by piece, looking for meaning in the patterns. What she found made her sit back in her chair and press both hands against her face. "Someone out there is asking us to come." Captain Griffin made the decision within a day. She changed the ship's course and pointed the starward horizon toward the Kepler 442 system. The journey would take 3 weeks at full speed. 3 weeks of waiting, wondering, and trying not to lose their minds with the biggest question any human being had ever faced. Are we alone? The answer, it seemed, was no. Nathan should have been excited. He was excited, but something else was happening to him. Something he could not explain and did not tell anyone about. He was dreaming. Every night, when he closed his eyes, he saw the same thing. A woman. She was not human. Her skin was a deep, soft violet, like the last light of a sunset. Her hair was silver white, and seemed to float around her head, as though she were underwater. Her eyes were large and bright, the color of warm amber, and they glowed with a faint inner light. She stood in a field of flowers that glowed in the dark, blues and purples and soft golds, and she looked at him, not past him, not through him, at him, and she smiled. It was not a human smile. Her lips parted only slightly, and a faint light pulsed under the skin of her cheeks, and her eyes grew brighter. But it meant the same thing a human smile meant. He was sure of it. He woke from these dreams with his heart pounding and his sheets soaked with sweat, and he felt something he had no words for. It was not fear. It was not excitement. It was something deeper, something that sat in his chest like a second heartbeat, warm and steady and completely impossible. He told himself it was stress. He told himself it was his brain playing tricks on him. He told himself a lot of things, and none of them helped, because every night the dream came back, and every night the woman was there, and every night she smiled at him as though she knew something about him that he did not know about himself. On the 15th day of the journey, Claire came to him with a new discovery. She had found a secondary layer in the signal, hidden beneath the primary pattern. It was not a message in the traditional sense. It was more like a feeling, a warmth, a pull, an emotional frequency that seemed designed to reach not the mind, but the heart. "This is not just communication," Claire said, and there was awe in her voice. "Whoever sent this, they were not just trying to talk to us, they were trying to feel us." He just stared at his hands and tried to ignore the way his chest was humming. On the 21st day, the starward horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of an uncharted star system. The bridge went silent. Every person on the ship stopped what they were doing and looked at the main view screen. Before them was a planet. It was roughly the size of Earth, but that was where the similarities ended. It was wrapped in rings of pale golden light, thin and delicate, like halos stacked on top of each other. The surface of the planet glowed faintly, and the glow moved, shifting and flowing in patterns that looked almost like circuits, almost like veins, almost like something alive. It was the most beautiful thing Nathan had ever seen. Captain Griffin stood at the center of the bridge, her arms folded, her jaw tight. Around her, the crew was holding their breath. "Well," she said quietly, "I guess they are expecting us." Nathan stared at the planet, and the warmth in his chest grew stronger. And he knew the way you know your own name, the way you know the sound of your mother's voice, that she was down there, the woman from his dreams, the woman with violet skin and amber eyes, and a smile that made the darkness feel less dark. He pressed his hand against his chest, and felt his heart beating hard and fast. He did not know what was waiting for him on that glowing golden world. He did not know if he was brave enough for what was coming. But he knew, with a certainty that went deeper than thought, deeper than reason, deeper than anything he had ever felt in his 29 years of life, that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The starward horizon moved forward, and the planet grew larger on the screen. And Nathan Cole, nobody special, nobody important, just a man who listened to the stars, took a deep breath and stepped into the future.